And we've got head coach, and I'll start this over for those of you who just joined us. This is the show on sportsnetusa.net. I am Corey Nayland, Mark Pavlovich up top, Ed Ford gracing us with his presence tonight. And down below is the head coach of the New Mexico Lobos softball team, Dr. Paula Congleton. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us today. And it's going to be an interesting show tonight because we love the sport of softball. We love knowledgeable people about softball. And the next hour, we're just going to get into it. Mark Pavlovich, as always, start us off.
Well, Dr. Paula, the first time we met you was in the world of community college softball, and you now are back in the world of D1 softball, NCAA D1 softball. So take us a little, because I always ask this. Everybody doesn't know somebody's background unless they go there. You went back to where you went to school. So let's get a little history about you before we actually, us three, delve into the world of softball. You started playing D1 softball and had an illustrious educational career. So a little background about yourself, and then we'll go delve into the world of softball itself.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me on this show, and I really appreciate it. It's always good to meet with, sports writers and sportscasters, and it gets our name out there, and I really appreciate that. So, my journey kind of started. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, and played ball at Highland High School, and was recruited to the University of New Mexico, where I was a first baseman and a catcher, and more exclusively positioned as a first baseman, and played. We went to the College World Series 2 of my 3 years, the Intermountain Conference Championship, and within that 4-year time period, I also was able to finish my um, bachelor's degree in education. And from there, I bounced out for a couple of years because all of my mentors at UNM said, go get some experience before you go back and get your master's degree. So that's what I did, and popped off, and then came back and was a grad assistant at UNM for softball, did my research on base running and some other things. And after I finished there, I got my master's degree. I went out to California and landed up at Santa Barbara City College. One, a beautiful, beautiful city. My office was 208 steps from the ocean, so you can't really beat that backdrop. And but yeah, and was a professor there in our health sciences division. I taught intro to biomechanics, kinesiology. I took some classes and taught some classes in the nursing division, fall prevention, healthy aging, health in general, and was very content there. I was also the head softball coach, and kind of, was very happy there and had no intention of leaving, and in fact planned on graduating, or sorry, retiring from Santa Barbara. And just one faithful May in 2017, got a phone call from Mr. Ed Manzanares and asked me if I would come back to the university that I so love, and to coach the softball team. And so here I am, 4 years later. When I started this profession, I knew I wanted to coach and teach at the collegiate level. And as far as this job is concerned, it found me. I feel like it's come full circle in my coaching career, bringing me back to New Mexico and at UNM, where it all began. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to be the head coach of a program that I once played in.
And you talk about that phone call you received 4 years ago. I mean, describe the feeling to us when you got the phone call and what was going through your mind.
Well, and to be very honest with you, I really didn't even have any intention of coaching Division I, because here's the deal. I had been offered numerous jobs in California, and actually back in the state of New Mexico at our rival, New Mexico State. And at the time, it just really wasn't what I wanted. I love the classroom, and after finishing my master's degree and teaching at that level, and then going on to finish my doctorate, it just was a perfect fit that I could do both things that I'm very passionate about, and it all worked. And of course, Santa Barbara being a very beautiful community and a very supportive community, it, like I said, it just really never kind of hit my radar. Um, and then, like I said, when Ed called, it was just the feeling was overwhelming, to be very honest with you. It was very emotional. My both of my parents are aging, and I've been away from home for 25 years, and to get the opportunity to come back and do something that I so love was not only emotional, it was exciting. I felt very privileged that they picked me and that they wanted me to be the head of their program. And so all of those wonderful emotions came with that phone call. And Ed Manzanatos is a very heartwarming local person himself, graduated from the University of New Mexico, is homegrown. So I think that just even meant that much more coming from him.
Dr. Congleton, one thing you touched on there that you were saying you got other offers, and I remember Mark and I were talking with Kelly Ford probably about 7, 8 years ago when she first came to Cal State Fullerton. And I remember we were doing a live interview with her, but pulled her aside after the interview and just asked her, Kelly, you've had so much success at the community college level. You gotta tell me that somebody has given you an opportunity or at least made you an offer to go to the D1 or D2 level. And it's good to hear that community college coaches are that respected as Kelly Ford and yourself, that there are Division II, Division I schools that are interested in the good community college softball coaches.
Yeah, and and I also appreciate that because we work just as hard, and to be honest with you, because Kelly happens to be a very good friend of mine, we probably work even harder than most people because in California we don't even have scholarships for the JUCO kids, for the community college kids. I mean, we are out there hustling, going to every high school game that's regional, that's local, because as community college coaches in California, you have regional restrictions and there's no athletic scholarship incentives. So while in Santa Barbara for a few years we did have an exemption to attend some out of state showcases, but it was crucial for me to attend all those local high school games and then anybody in our contiguous area because I had to make the most bang for my buck. And with those showcases within California, it made it that much easier to recruit. And besides the fact that Santa Barbara is probably one of the most beautiful communities in California, was a nice perk. The flip side of that is it's very expensive to live there, but still, I did appreciate the opportunity. And look at Kelly, look what she's done with Cal State Fullerton. They were probably ranked 199 at one point, and she got up to 99, and I think RPI, she's probably in the top 40. So she's done a phenomenal job there in the last 7 years.
Doctor, let's sort of stay right there because I know everybody says coaching is coaching, but when you look at the community college world of softball compared to the D1 world of softball, and you've already talked about the disadvantage because we're recruiting and everything, but what was it for you? Did you have to change your coaching style going from Santa Barbara to where you are now? Or was it that smooth transition when you walked in and said, oh, it's like moving from Orange County to Santa Barbara? Wow, look at this. This is pretty cool. So, I mean, what was that transition like for you from community college to D1?
Yeah, so at the community college, again, no scholarships, but I didn't really look ahead more than 1 or 2 years because that's the kind of kid that I'm going to get. So, like I said before, selectively going to certain showcases where I can get the most bang for my buck. Now at Division One, I'm looking at, 1 to 4 years out. You guys all know we just signed our 21s, but we've also had our 22s commit. And with COVID, the 23s are panicking a little bit. Some of the 22s are panicking a little bit. We just got news yesterday that recruiting dead period has been extended to April 15th. But the transition and what I different is just that time frame of now I'm just not looking at a kid for 1 or 2. I'm looking at a kid that is the freshman, the sophomore, um, maybe occasionally the eighth grader if we pop into the 12U or 14Us. So the longevity of watching the recruits and the players is a lot different than I would have done at the community college level, for sure. I'm also allowed, of course, to go anywhere in the world. We stay national at this point, and to be really honest with you, we hone it down to regional. So we recruit heavy out of Arizona. Um, you can see my roster. We pick up the best New Mexico kids, and we also go into Texas. We've got a really good relationship with some of those top level national teams there. So right now we've been state and regional, but look at my roster. I've got kids out of Washington, Oregon, Georgia. So that's really different. I can tell you the first time that I went recruiting, and it was down at a PGF event down there at Irvine, and I walk in and I'm in the University of New Mexico stuff, and some of the coaches, had recognized me from the community college level, and I walk up to some of the teams, and they're like, "Oh, wait a second, you're with New Mexico," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the head coach at University of New Mexico." So the tone also changes for the travel
Right.
ball teams looking at us. And even now, I mean, the honest truth of it is, and they may not want to hear this, but it's true, is there are some travel ball teams that won't give New Mexico a look. They're just like, "Oh, well, whatever and it's like, excuse me, like you don't even know me. um, Let your kid make that decision. Let the parents and the kid make that decision. Stop making those decisions for them." And so, we've had to, work with a lot of travel ball coaches. And, I feel like I'm a very personable person. My assistant coach, Tyler Heil, who's my recruiting coordinator, is also very personable. And we work really hard at developing relationships and being kind and looking at certain things. And for us, because we're both exercise science people, I don't just look at like the metrics that everybody's so involved with. It's like, well, if the kid can't move, like I already know that the metrics aren't any good. So, um, we've evolved in our recruiting, and we've evolved. I've evolved as a coach, and I feel like as a lifelong learner that's one of the things that is really important for me to maintain success or even continue to grab more success is you know um, going out and selecting those players and going to those far off fields where I know I can get that diamond in the rough, because maybe the top 10 coaches in our nation are like, I already know what travel ball teams are going to give me their kids. I already know what type of kids those are, so I just stick with that. Well, I mean, the Mountain West is the next highest conference there is. I mean, if it was called the Power Six, we would be part of that group. So
Yeah.
we're not far behind. We're really not that far behind. And for me as a coach, one of the things that I really look at is recruiting players that complement each other. I don't just recruit, 6 shortstops and 1 pitcher. It's like I go up the middle of the field. If I want a catcher, then I'm looking at that catcher. I'm looking how she sits, how she receives, how she throws, how she hits. I'm just not looking at, oh, what's her pop time? Like, can she even throw? So, those are the types of things that I've evolved. And now that I get to look at the better kids, because I know I can compete now, well, the truth of the matter is, my first year, the team was set. So we went out recruiting for our second year's team. And from there, I still didn't get between the top. I wasn't competing with anybody. Well, now, guess what? We're getting kids that would have gone to Oregon. We're getting kids that would have gone to Oregon State. In fact, we got an Oregon State transfer, Izzy Owen. We're competing with some of those bigger schools to get those great kids. So I feel like we're definitely back.
Well, Coach, you just answered three of my next questions in that, because I was going to ask you. So you evolved from Santa Barbara to New Mexico, and you're coaching. So can you speak more in detail about the philosophy of your coaching that's evolved?
Yeah, so I feel like even in Santa Barbara, I've always been a teacher because I really feel like coaches are teachers. I mean, we have to, because there are so many kids that come from all over the country. I mean, even in Santa Barbara, I mean, if you look at my roster, there were kids from all over the place because everybody wanted to be in Santa Barbara. So for me, I go to conferences, I go to our national conventions. But as far as evolving as a coach and evolving in my philosophy, one, my job depends on me. In Santa Barbara, I was a full-time faculty tenured member of the staff. So
Mhm.
although there was security in that, that doesn't mean that I didn't want to work hard or to do the next best thing. So evolution for me is really getting out there, understanding and knowing that we pick the right kids, and knowing what to look for, going to those national exposure tournaments. Things change from year to year, so it's a process. Like I mentioned before, we try to get kids that are athletically and academically fit for our program. I'm probably one of the few programs that allows our student athletes to choose whatever major they want. Like, it doesn't matter. We've
Wow.
got two kids that are in the medical program. We've got two or three that are in engineering. We've got three or four exercise science kids. We've got one in archaeology. And I'm going to tell you, part of that and my philosophy is it's their passion, it's not mine.
Right.
Because if I'm going to pay for the school, then great, I'm paying for them to be one of our products. But it's also important for me as a female role model that our female student athletes are proud that they can accomplish whatever they want. And shoot, for the past 26 semesters, we've had a GPA of over 3.2. And I really
Wow.
attribute that because we allow our kids to be successful, whatever academic adventure they want to go on.
Okay.
And I
So
think part of the other part of that, Corey, is that I really want to create an environment where our student athletes thrive. They can persevere with pride, that they're natural leaders, they're motivators, they're open minded, they're eager to learn, they respect not only themselves and others, but they respect the game. So when I go to tournaments, I get out there early. If a game starts at 8 o'clock, I'm there in the parking lot at 6:30 because I want to watch those kids get out of their car. I want to watch those kids. If the parents are already fighting with the kids and they haven't even stepped on the field, man, I run from those kind of parents and kids. It's just too much trouble, right? So
right.
if a parent's arguing with the kid, I, like, what's going on, right? So I all of those things are things that are really important to me as far as the foundation of just even a student athlete. Besides being successful on the field, they've got to be successful in life. And what I think we try to do, and what I love about our mascot, is it's a Lobo. We run with the pack. Like, nobody leaves any behind. It's just, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, it's such a wonderful, like, I'm so proud to be a Lobo because, like, we don't leave anybody behind. And we run as a pack, and it's that pack mentality of, like, everybody's working hard and everybody's talented. And you got to work hard, and character counts.
And we're going to
Well,
take it to
I was
Ed for a
waiting.
second because I had a. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mark.
I was waiting for Ed too. So
Oh, no, I was waiting for Mark to do his male coach, female coach question.
wait a minute. How do you know I was going there? No,
Because I knew you
really,
were.
Ed,
Yeah.
because Ed knows me too well. Because Dr. Paul, I mean, one of the things in everything that you said here, and you're talking about respect and honor and integrity for your students. Carol Hutchins, when her and I would talk in the PGF and everything, and I would talk to her about recruiting and all that. And the one thing Carol would always bring up to me is, Mark, you need to realize I'm competing against the men that are softball coaches, and I'm competing against the male dominated sports at my university. So I've got to ask you where you're at right now. How do you, I mean, besides the PhD, which, yes, when somebody says it's Dr. So and so, adds a little flavor to it. How do you overcome that natural obstacle that we still have in sports today, where it's the female coach versus the male coach, especially in the game of softball?
To be very honest with you, I don't I don't concern myself too much with like percentages of male coaches versus female coaches. I feel like there's some really great male coaches, and there are some phenomenal female coaches. And I mean, I think for most of us as female coaches, we could beat ourselves up and hit our heads against the wall. Why are these jobs still going to male coaches? Why do they keep happening? Well, I've done some research on that, and a lot of the opportunities are females. Females don't necessarily go after those opportunities, and um, I think as the game evolves, and please, it has evolved tremendously since when I played. I think there are more women getting into the sport, and I just saw some shuffles of all the coaches going around. Sammy is now at Texas Tech. Northridge just got a new coach, so those positions were filled by women, which I'm so proud of. But I don't concern myself so much about like, oh well, what's Ray Birmingham getting with Lobo baseball? Because
Mm-hmm.
if I worried about everything that he was getting, then I'm not getting, I'd be pissed off all the time, or I would be angry, or I'd be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Why am I taking this job? Like, I got to go out and
Okay.
hustle myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like some of the things that we've done at our facility, when we first went in there, we got it painted. I spent like $22,000 just on equipment alone, just to upgrade things. This past season, we spent 50 grand on a brand new lockers for our kids, because the previous ones had been hand me downs. If you look at our facility as far as the wall padding, we just spent a ton of money in branding what I wanted out there. If you noticed our uniforms, it's a throwback to me. Every single one of our uniforms has turquoise. We have the tribal design, the Zia design of turquoise, which is our native stone. Everything that we are New Mexico has been a brand about what is about me, and that I'm true New Mexico. You just brought back a New Mexico girl. Like, you can't get any more proud than that. So
Yeah.
I don't worry so much about that national spectrum. When I'm on committees, absolutely do I defend us. But do I worry about it on a day-to-day basis? No, I can't.
Okay. At
Yeah.
least you made
Yeah.
Ed
I love
smile.
it.
Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that smile Ed, on that one answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We love that answer.
Ed, why'd I make you smile?
Uh, I'm just an impressed person. You mentioned earlier that your team has they're student athletes, and you mentioned the GPA 3.3, I think, was the mean average of it. What other not facilities, but resources do your players have as student athletes that will help them with their academics while they're playing softball for you?
Yeah, we have a huge student success center for our student athletes. It's the lower level is our compliance, which is, you know, the transcripts come in, all of that eligibility stuff, and then on the second level is 100% student success center. So we have computer centers in there. We have tutoring rooms. We have academic advisors for every team, and so we've got you know, the academic advisor that helps the students or the players with their majors, helps them get their class schedules, study hall, securing tutors, all of that kind of stuff. So very, very good. Uh, Mrs. Chris Baca is our director, and she is phenomenal. And you know, same with our advisors. They come to our games. They meet weekly with our student athletes. If our student athlete needs something more than that, then they're always available. So I definitely attribute that. Other resources, you know, besides the academic, I mean, with the University of New Mexico hospital being associated with the university, our medical staff includes 8 orthopedic doctors. We've got gen med docs, nurses, athletic trainers to keep our athletes healthy, and you know, the top-notch technology that's available. I mean, University of New Mexico is a Trauma One center, so our kids can get in and seen and back on the field before you know it. We each have our own strength and conditioning coach, and so that's really important for their physical strength and conditioning. We've got mental health counselors. One of the things that we've just added this year with COVID and some of the tension that seems to be pervasive in the United States is um, our inclusion and diversity group and our student advisory committee that ties into our leadership council. So I think our kids can get a really full rounded experience at UNM.
And does being having that doctorate in educational administration, does that help facilitate your student athletes becoming good student athletes and help facilitate the program in ways that a coach that doesn't have that background that may not be able to be as successful at doing that?
Yeah, I think it does. One of the things, you know, again, why we have so many varied majors on our team is if a player, like you know, we'll set our practice time and we'll practice from 9 to noon. And if a player needs to leave practice because they have a class, it's not a big deal to me. Like we'll catch them back up. We can make modifications. I think one of the other things that has always been fun for me is kind of getting to help and to discuss and to give a different perspective to my student athletes. So they can come into the office and they're like, "Oh, hey, coach, I have this paper, and by the way, I also need to interview you." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go." You know, so I let them feel comfortable with that. You know, a lot of my players will come in and say, "Hey, you know, this is just the first draft of my paper. I don't mind taking a red pen to it." So I do that and kind of help them get a different perspective from from my end as a professor. Like, "Oh, hey, like, no, this is crap," or "Hey, put some more stuff into your PowerPoint," or "Take some stuff out." If my players have interviews or if they have presentations, or I make them do in front of the team because it just
Okay.
gives them that little extra experience before they have to go do it in front of their, you know, their peers in their class.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna interrupt you real quick. Mark, hold on, Mark. Okay, you back to that statement you said if a player has to leave before the practice time is over. I'll give you guys the next couple questions. Okay, we've been around a lot of coaches, okay, that aren't as flexible or aren't as understanding as what you're saying. And how did you or what prompted you to be this sort of coach? Because it's refreshing that it's either my way or the highway, or with you, it's let's work it out. How would that become you as a coach?
I think it's just really important because the bottom line is most of these kids are going to play ball for 4 years and that's it. Some of them might become coaches. Most of them will be doctors, engineers, nurses, whatever they want to be. And so for me to show that I am actually engaged with what they are doing and that they can ask me questions, I can ask them questions. I think it just goes hand in hand. And what that does is it creates a very inclusive environment. And look, like Andrea Howard, I'll give you, for example, our kid that plays for Team Italy. She'll be
Hmm.
going to the Olympics. Phenomenal kid. A 4.2 GPA, is going to be a doctor. She doesn't know what type of doctor yet. She's doing emergency med right now. But because she's starting to follow the residents around, are you kidding
Hmm.
me? I am so proud of that. Like, what kind of a person would I be if I just said, "Oh no, Andre, I need you to take 50 more cuts." My God, the kid's already playing for the Olympic team. What more do I need?
Okay. All right. Yeah,
You know,
that's so cool. That's so cool.
it really
And
is. And here's the deal: those kids work harder for me. I feel like they'll grind it out and they'll come early, or if they have to come back later. What am I doing? I'm not teaching. It's my job to be there. Not a big deal.
Okay.
And here's
so
the
let's
deal: I look at everybody's schedule, and then
Mhm.
whatever team we need to do, we do those things first. And then if somebody needs to leave, not a big deal because we've already taken care of pop-up communication. We've already taken care of, infield, outfield. We've already taken care of first and thirds. We've already taken care of, whatever, bunt defense. Doesn't matter.
All right.
so let's roll that over to the actual softball player, no longer just the student athlete, because the game has always been based on great pitching from the circle, timely hitting, and outrageous defense. You said you patterned the uniform after the years you played. So I need to know, has the student athlete or the athlete in softball and the game itself changed through the years? Because I personally, being an old guy, have seen the bunt go away, certain hit and run go away. So is softball basically the same, but a much different game today than it was when you played?
Yeah, I think it has changed. I think about, well, first of all, equipment wise, I mean, let's be honest, you don't have to be a good hitter to hit the ball out of the ballpark with, the composite that these bats are made out of. Um, and pitching has definitely changed. I think what kind of cracks me up sometimes is, we get emails and hundreds of them and videos and kids will be like, "Oh, I have 9 pitches," and I'm like, "Well, good for you, girl, because we're probably only going to use 3 or 4." So the game in that has changed. I think, one of the coolest things for me, my first year was we went to the University of Arizona tournament. And Mike Condrea, of course, icon of our sport, phenomenal person, just amazing. Um, so we get invited to his tournament, and I walk out onto his field, and he looks at me and he was like, "I remember you." And I was like, okay, because I'm already, I'm a little nervous, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. Because when Susan Craig was our head coach, we played U of A. We played them a lot. And so to get to
Mm-hmm.
go and stand on that same home plate with Mike Candrea was phenomenal. And he's kind of old school and he's evolved. He's the bunt and run master. He's the small game master. He's the one that kind of invented that whole thing. And now he's got some bigger kids that can just crush the ball over the bleachers. So the game has evolved. I think for me, I'm more of a traditionalist, so I do keep the bunt. If I've got a runner on second and we don't have any outs and I've got a good kid that is contact but maybe not power, I don't have a problem putting the bunt down to bring that runner over to third. So I absolutely agree. I think the game has evolved, but yet it's still the same in most respects. I think the rules are kind of starting to change. They're trying to meld us with international rules as the NCAA rules committee starts to kind of, create, and they send us surveys, or if I'm on a committee, they're trying to get that whole game so that whatever and whoever transitions from our game into the Olympics or to the Cup, World Cup, whatever they do, then the smooth transition for those kids is a lot easier.
Okay. Ed, did you have one?
I've got like
I,
30,
oh,
but
go,
I'm
go.
trying to be I'm
I'm
trying to
done.
be generous. I don't
Oh
want
no,
to
I'm
hog up
after that
everything.
last question and that answer I got, I'm done for the night. I'm just listening.
We certainly know your background at Santa Barbara, making the transition to D1, and we talked about that. But what about the players? You have two community college players on your roster for 2021. And I know in the past I've looked at your roster before and you've had other community college players. What challenges do community college players face making that transition from not only just from community college to the university level, but then the ones that jump from, in the case of your players, have jumped from community college to the D1 level?
Hmm. I think in many cases the transition can be difficult. I think there are a lot of really talented players at our level, and sometimes we get misunderstood. So, for example, I've been on both sides, right? I was a JUCO community college coach, and now I'm D1. And so, when I was at Santa Barbara, I'm always pushing my kids, like, hey, hey, this Division I school, can you take a look at my kid? I really think she can make it. I need this, she's this. And then, we'd send our kids to NAIA, or we'd send them to D2 or D3 schools, and very few made it to Division I. And so now, flip side of the coin, I'm at D1 and we look at JUCO players. Um, it's difficult. It's a difficult transition. And I still get it even now from coaches who are like, how come you're not picking up our players? The truth of the matter is we did a kind of like a statistical analysis just on our own of JUCO kids that actually make it Division I, that are successful. I'm not just saying that we give them a scholarship or that we have them on our rosters. I'm talking about being successful. They're hitting 250, they're hitting, 300. Their ERAs are, 1 point something after 2 years. And that's a pretty rare thing. But that, Kiana, Izzy now coming in, and now Emma. Izzy and Emma, well, Izzy actually is from another D4, a D1 school. But it can be difficult because they've got to grasp our system. Um, the game is faster in many situations. And then depending on where they came from, if they're not used to the demands that we put on them, so for instance, 7 a.m. strength and conditioning, then they come over for breakfast, then they do some individual stuff. Then, after that, they've got advising, they've got community service, they've got academic requirements, we've traveled. And so if they're not very good with time management, then they do absolutely struggle, no matter how much assistance we give them. So in many situations, it is a tough road to hoe.
Well,
Coach, I'm
I
going to
will give
jump
you,
in.
well, I'm going to jump in just to finish that thought up.
Okay.
Just to say that I appreciate the fact that you do at least, I mean, as you said, it's a difficult transition and you have to be able to hit, you have to be able to pitch, you have to be able to play defense, and you have to fit into what's going on at your school. But it seems like, at least at New Mexico and a couple other schools, that the community college players at least are getting a chance. I talked to one community college coach, and she was doing the same thing that you were doing at Santa Barbara, calling up, D2 schools, D1 schools, NAIA. And she told me flat out, there are coaches who just say, I'm not interested in any of your players. If they're not here for 4 years, I don't even want a JUCO player. And to me, that isn't really in the best interest of the student athlete or the team. I mean, sometimes there are community college players that are basically damn good and can make it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always a role, especially now that, we're kind of starting to get our classes in. Kids transfer all the time, like, or we release them. Sometimes. I mean, shoot. When you think about when we watch these kids, I'm watching them for a weekend. I watch them for maybe 4 to 5 games, maybe 6, if they make it into the championship, and if they're not already committed, right? So I'm basing my evaluation, whether it's a 70%, an 80%, 100% scholarship, on sometimes one weekend worth of evaluation. Whereas, with the JUCO kids, we can follow them a little easier. In some situations, we can get out to their games a lot easier than we can get out to certain tournaments. And so I do. I honestly believe that there's always a role for them. And sometimes, here's the deal: if a kid transfers or leaves our program, and shoot, in the last 2 years, we've had 2 kids just stop playing softball altogether because they got internships in their passionate educational career, and so they just stopped. They were just like, Coach, we love you, but guess what? I can go do an internship for Nike, and maybe I'll be your Nike rep when I come back, right? So um, now I'm looking for a sophomore, and I'm like, oh, there's a JUCO kid. So, sometimes people think like, oh, all we're doing is recruiting freshmen. That's not the truth, because we've got 12 scholarships. And within that time frame, if a junior leaves, then I'm looking to refill with a junior, because I can't have a freshman, because that money isn't going to go that far. So I 100% think that there's definitely a role for JUCO kids.
Okay, now I'm going to cut off Corey Nayland because he cut me off. Because if I let a softball coach get away, and the two on the right side of your screen know there's a couple bugaboos this guy's got. Coach, one of the things, especially in D1, when we look at the College World Series, rankings always are involved. And we currently look at some of them where the RPI stands there. So I have problems with RPI. If you look at the rankings right now, Louisiana is #1 in the nation in the RPI rankings, with UCLA #2. I won't go through all of them, followed by Texas. If you go to the coaches poll, UCLA is #1. Washington's #2. Texas is 3, and Arizona's 4. And if you go to Softball America, Texas is 1, UCLA's 2, Washington's 3, Arizona's 4. RPI drives me crazy. So I'm going to ask you as a head coach, for the system of the College World Series, how do we pick those people and where they go? Because normally it comes down to rankings. Is an RPI a fair system, or should we find something else that is more likable to the coaches across the nation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that based on the percentages that are given to the RPI criteria, those things probably could be tweaked a little bit, and maybe even adding a criteria. Because you're right. Like, for us, we really try to schedule a very competitive non-conference season, one that's going to prepare us for what we have to face in the conference, and prepare us for regionals once we pop out of conference. So the RPI, yeah, people struggle with it. And then when you think about it, even beyond that, then all of a sudden, then it pops out, and then it's regional. So like for us, let's just say this year for 21, we make it. Say we just have a kick-ass season, and we're #1 in the Mountain West. My region's going to be probably Arizona.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So yeah, I kind of agree with you that maybe we need to change the percentages and maybe add a criteria. and maybe do something like that.
Yeah, and that's interesting, Coach, because Mark and I always talk about that, about he talks about the RPI. Ed and I has also talked about the regionality of when you get into the World Series. When you get a team like yours in New Mexico, and you have to play in Arizona, but you just won the Mountain West Conference, and we all feel that that's if there's a conference that's next going to come up and surprise people, that's going to be the next conference to do big things. And you get like Cal State Fullerton, as we mentioned before, always playing UCLA. And so I remember a conversation we had a couple of years ago. Ed said, why not take a couple of those schools, put them on the East Coast, and just let them play there, or not always putting them up against the Arizonas and the UCLAs to have more variety. Um, is that something that again, that would be beneficial to the game?
I mean, I think it would. And, of course, the top dogs are always going to say, well, you got to beat us because we're going to land up at the World Series anyway. And it's like, well, yeah, potentially. But I think when you create a little bit more, and I mean, please, sports is not about equity. I mean, when we talk about Title IX, it is, but it, on that, there is no equity, right? So,
Right.
Right.
get that. And, maybe I would have a different opinion if I was in the top, top five, maybe top 10, whatever. But I still think that just going regionally, it kind of, and for me personally, I think it allows teams from the East and from some of those other smaller conferences to start to make it through and get more opportunities than we would in the West and the Southwest. So it's like, okay, well, we talk about equity, and it's like, well, you're letting Podunk University host, and you're putting me against Arizona. And yes, I'm not saying that we can't beat them, but like give me an opportunity to at least make it into super regionals and see what we do, and then my team gains momentum. So yeah, I think that structure for the most part should change a little bit as far as the regional fitting of that. I mean, look at basketball. I mean, they're all over the map.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And you talk about equity, basketball, the money they make, and softball. I did have one more question, but I'm going to turn it over to Ed and Mark for the last one because I'm going to be long winded on that one. So we have to get you in time. Mark, Ed, you got
That's
one?
okay, Corey. You can be
Oh,
long-winded. Be
yeah.
long-winded.
Corey, wait a minute, Corey. Corey, I got one before the coach leaves. Ed's going to
I
sit there
know. Okay.
because, Coach, I got to get this in, and then I'll get out of Corey's way. Corey Nayland and I, and Ed Ford will tell you. Look at Ed's looking at us now. Every softball game we do, be it a tournament, be it conference play, be it playoffs, we'll go back and forth about ERAs and what ERAs are acceptable. And I've already done my research. I mean, when you look at the top 5 individual pitchers, ERA, Coppersmith is at 1.9. Then you've got Wickersham at 4.0. Behind that is Williams at 0.46. I can go down till you get out of the top 20, and then you hit one. Corey Naylor will turn around and say, well, acceptable is. So I'm going to throw it at you because you've talked about the big kids on the block and playing against them. For you as a head coach, when you're looking at your staff, what is an acceptable number in Division One ERA? I know what number 50 is. It's 2.41. So where does it fall in there when you look at your team?
Yeah, ERA is kind of crazy because here's one thing about it. It's the SIDs up in the booth that are doing it. So, oh, that was it. Then the other side going, oh no, that player should have got that. Well, you don't know my team. How do you know that that was an error? How do you know that was an earned run? How do you know that was what? Besides that, I mean, for us on the offensive
I've
side,
been there.
right? So for us on the
Yeah.
offensive side, what we always say is, man, we got to score every inning. So if we could score, 5 out of the 7 innings, boom, there's 5 runs. If we can keep our ERA at 2.5 or below, then we're going to be in there. We're going to be in, like you said, in that top 50. We're going to be making the regional, hopefully the super regionals, and we're on a roll. I think one of the things that we're excited about this year, and with COVID and shutting things down. Last year I felt like we were off to a really good start, and we played at Texas, and yes, Ellis, kicked our butt all over the place.
Hmm.
But we played some good games. We beat Stanford. We're making the right strides, and I think this year with our pitching staff, Kiana is back. Super excited about having her back. She's a lefty that throws the ball up, has a phenomenal changeup, and then we added Emma, who out of Monterey Peninsula, and she's just a go-getter. And although we only had a few months to work with her because now our school has been shut down, New Mexico is a closed state. We're like house arrest, almost, right? So it, and then we've got some thumbers, and I think for us in the last couple of years, we've had everybody, and they've all been between, 58 and 62. And I
Hmm.
can't change that a lot. But now we've got some kids that have some really good spin, some off speed. Man, some of our changeup the kids are throwing are like at 40, at 37.
Wow.
So I've got 5 kids. I got one, I'm not going to give away all my secrets, but I got one kid that's throwing 66. So when you got a 66 and then you've got a thumber, like we've been talking to our kids on Zoom calls, that we really are going to use the staff this year. And I have a new pitching coach, Bree. You guys probably saw. She moved back to Arizona with her husband, DJ Peterson, and they're doing their thing out there in Arizona. And I really believe that with our 5 kids, that we're going to use them all. I mean, how difficult it is that when somebody's trying to scout us or figure out what our game plan is. I mean, literally, I could use all 5 kids every single game and nobody would be tired, and try to scout that, right? So I'm pretty excited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ed, we'll leave the final question for you, if you have one, Ed.
I don't really think I have a final question. So how about one of
Go
your
ahead,
long-winded
Corey.
ones, Corey?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to bring up the long-winded question, but I will bring up. You mentioned uniforms, how you incorporated New Mexico into the uniforms. Um, ex- Explain a little bit more about that, because I know you touched on it briefly about incorporating that and the community service that you do as a team.
Yes. So when I took the program over, um, we looked in the cabinet and the uniforms were gray and red, and there was a white one with red. And I'm like, oh no, like we got to spruce this up. So um, the other cool thing that I have to say about our uniform design is Tyler Heil has his master's degree in health and science and kinesiology, but he also has a degree in um, graphic design. And so we sit back and forth, and I'm like, oh, I think this would look really cool. And then he gets on his computer and he puts stuff together, and he's like, what do you think about this one? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And because we are sponsored by Nike and we happen to be an elite program, we can pretty much customize anything that we want. So our first year, I was like, Tyler, I want you to match all of our uniforms. So we have 5 uniforms and we can mix and match. So we can go full turquoise with bottom and top, or we can go white top and turquoise bottoms, or we can go white with red, anthracite, whatever you want. And then this year we're adding a pinstripe uniform. So that was just kind of part of my pride in bringing back some of the tradition to what uh, I think sometimes our newbies and our current kids and maybe the future kids are kind of unaware of. And it's really important to me, especially as alumni and now that the head coach, of understanding where that tradition comes from, and that I am now bringing you and putting you on my shoulders so that we can elevate the program even more, um, and just kind of keep it true to who we are in New Mexico.
Well, Coach, we want to thank you very much. Mark, you have one more before we let Coach go?
No, you know me. I'm more long-winded than you are.
Coach, we just want to thank you very much again for talking to us. We talked to you years ago at the Golden West tournament while you were at Santa Barbara. Love talking
Yeah.
to you there. Love talking to you now because, like we said, the Mountain West Conference, we had this conversation right before softball season started in 2020, when before it ended. And we felt that the teams in the Mountain West were the next teams to really make a move and get to the College World Series. And you have that program on the right track. So we really appreciate what you've done. I really appreciate the uniforms because the uniforms are, I love uniforms. They're so boring nowadays that any variety and jazziness, what you say, to the uniforms is a good thing. So, Coach, thank you very much for joining us. And before we let you go, anything you want to say that we didn't bring up?
No, not really. I just want to say just gosh dang it, how proud I am to be back home. I sorry, I am just so proud to be the head coach of the University of New Mexico, to be home, to be a native of this state, and to be doing the cool stuff that we're doing with this program. Um, it's just like the perfect ending to my career. I just can't be more blessed and I'm more proud to be a Lobo again, and super excited about the future of this program. The kids we're recruiting. Eddie Nunez has been a phenomenal athletic director, and I think you're going to see a lot of really cool stuff coming out of the University of New Mexico athletic department.
And we know we will. So once again, the head coach for the New Mexico Lobos softball team, Dr. Paula Congleton. Thank you for joining us. Mark Pavlovich up top, Ed Ford down below. My name is Corey Nayland, and once again, you've been watching the show on SportsNetUSA.net.